better than sliced bread was when they got an electronic stencil cutter. And I could put a picture in and go to the school board office and they cut the stencils and put it against that. And then you can actually have little pictures in there. As you know, I like to print things, and you'll see I give you lots of stuff to look at. And Janet said I should have used a nicer, a happier picture when I had my clerical collar on. I thought I'd take it serious. Someone got to take me serious. I had to grow a beard because years ago I was ministering in Dock from Manitoba, and I cut my beard off, and this little lady came to me, this little Ukrainian Bible says, "Oh," she said, "you look like a little boy up there with the little round face." I didn't think you were the pastor, so I grew a beard, and I've kept it ever since. That was 40 years ago. I trimmed it down because it doesn't grow all that good, you know. They say, how do you grow a beard? You give it milk, put milk in your face, and when it comes out to drink, you tie one in a knot so it can't get back in. Some people can grow beards, I can't grow a beard that way. But anyways, so it's wonderful how things have changed. And now we can be on Facebook. And now we can be, and people can use it for garbage. I mean, some of the stuff I'm seeing on there, for Christians, it's disgusting. Attacking government people and saying horrible, horrible things. And there's anger and all that out there. God said, don't get angry for those that are in leadership over you. Pray for them. Love them and bless them. Well, you might not agree. You can speak up, but you don't have to get nasty and slam them. So that's a lesson for us to say, well, let's take and put good on there. So for years, I watched all these goofy pictures and stuff that come over. And then I thought, I started to write, "There is hope." Because a friend of mine was going through a difficult time. And I started to write, "There is hope." I take a picture and write something about hope in it. And now I've got 1,165 articles there that I've written. And people can look at them and pass them on. And when I write, I just say, my copyright is please copy it right. The Lord gave it to me to share from my experience, and it can bless you. Death is in the air. Does anyone care? I'm telling you, we're facing death in the air. Just have to look what's happened in Saskatchewan this week. Death is in the air, even in our country. Does anyone care? But we're going to go through the book. We're reading through the book of Acts and going through the book of Acts. And we're in chapter 12. And as we look in chapter 12, you know what I need to do? I need to put these in order. That won't work. All right. You don't want me to start at the back and then go to the front? You heard about the fellow that got up to preach, and he got up and he had pages in his hand, and after each page, he flipped the pages, set the pages down. And everybody thought that was good, because when he got to the last page, they thought, good, he's done. And he got to the last page, and then what he did is he picked them up and started on the other side. The ones that they don't like are the ones that keep them in their hands. You can't count the pages because they just keep them so you can't see them. So you don't know when you're going to stop. One fellow said, "What does it mean when the pastor says, in conclusion?" The little boy says, "Nothing." We're reading in Acts chapter 12, the New International. It was about the time that King Herod arrested some who belonged to the church, intending to persecute them. He had James, the brother of John, put to death with the sword. When he saw that this met the approval among the Jews, he proceeded to seize Peter also. And this happened during the feast of the unleavened bread. After arresting him, he put him in prison, handing him over to be guarded by 4 squads of 4 soldiers each. Herod intended to bring him out for public trial after the Passover. So Peter was kept in prison, but the church was earnestly praying to God for him. How do you spell impossible? I mean, he's got all these squads around him, and he's locked up in jail. And Herod's just waiting. And verse 6 said, the night before Herod was to bring him to trial, which Herod wanted him killed, last minute. How many times does the answers come in the last minute? Usually. Because I asked the Lord, why does it always come in the last minute? And what really came to me when I was praying one time was that because the enemy demands every last minute to get you to give up. He's going, you can't, doesn't need it yet. He'll give up. He'll give up. Give me a little more time. Give me a little more time. And then when the critical time happens, the answer to prayer comes. It says that the night before he was to bring him to trial, Peter was sleeping between 2 soldiers, bound with 2 chains. And sentries stood guard at the entrance. Suddenly, an angel of the Lord appeared, and light shone in the cell. He struck Peter on the side and woke him up. "Quick, get up," he said. And the chains fell off Peter's wrist. Wow. The chains fell off. I mean, I'll take a whack like that if it's going to set me free. You know, sometimes God has to get our attention. Then the angel said to him, "Put on your clothes and sandals." And so Peter did. "Wrap your cloak around you and follow me," the angel told him. Peter followed him out of the prison, but he had no idea that what the angel was doing was really happening. He thought he was seeing a vision. They passed the first and second guards and came to the iron gate leading to the city. It opened for them by itself. It was a huge gate that they don't open by themselves. They locked them up, and I remember they locked them up, and in Nehemiah's day, they would keep the gates locked until the full bright light of day came, so that no one could sneak in and get them. But it said the gate of the city opened, and by itself, and when they walked the length of one street, suddenly the angel left him. Then Peter came to himself. I like it where it says, and he came to himself. The prodigal came to himself. How do you ever come to yourself? Then you go, "Oh, I get it. I get it. I'm there. I just came to myself." Well, it means you become aware, you realize, you comprehend what's happening. He came to himself and said, "Now I know without a doubt that the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me from Herod's clutches." What was the first clue? Well, the chains fell off. The guards are all sleeping. The doors, the sentries are sleeping. The gate of this opens wide, and he came to himself out of Herod's clutches. And from everything the Jewish people were hoping would happen, they wanted to see Peter destroyed. When this dawned on him, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, also called Mark, where many people were gathered and praying. Wow, they were praying. Peter knocked on the outer entrance, and a servant named Rhoda came to answer the door. When she recognized Peter's voice, she was so overjoyed, she ran back without opening it and exclaimed, "Peter's at the door." Yeah, she's pretty excited. "Peter's at the door! Peter's at the door!" "You're out of your mind," they told her. This is like a midnight prayer group. "You're out of your mind," they told her. She kept insisting it was so, and so they said, "It must be his angel." So they're assuming that now he's died. Don't give up on the Lord's promise, no matter what comes, no matter what it looks like. Don't give up on his promises. We're on the brink of a miracle. Don't give up. But Peter kept knocking, and when they opened the door and saw it, they were astonished. Now, what were they praying for? They were praying, they had prayer meetings that went on for a long time, from one feast to another feast. And what were they praying for? Anybody know what they're praying for? For his deliverance. They're praying for Peter. They're praying that something would happen, that God could do something. Were they really believing? You know, it's not because we believe all the time that a miracle is going to happen. God just sometimes just steps in with a miracle. It said, when they saw him, they opened the door, they were astonished. "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be in prison, in chains and shackles and sleeping between soldiers." But Peter motioned for his hand for them to be quiet. They were in awe and described how the Lord had brought him out of prison. And then he said, "Tell James and the other brothers and sisters about this," he said, and he left for another place. In the morning there was no small commotion among the soldiers as to what had become of Peter. After Herod had thoroughly a search made for him and did not find him, he cross-examined the guards and ordered them to be executed. Not a nice guy. They lost their lives over this. When Herod went from Judea to Caesarea and stayed there, he had been quarreling with the people of Tyre and Sidon, and they now joined together and sought an audience with him after securing the support of Blastus, a trusted personal servant of the king. They asked for peace because they depended on the king's country for their food supply. We're kind of there today too. We depend on our countries. We depend on the government. We depend on many things. We depend on the government to make sure that things are safe. Right now on the East Coast, all over the east side of the United States, they're recalling all the Dole salads because listeria was found in them. And some people have died from them. And so, I mean, can you imagine recovering all the salads? And I mean, you know nowadays people don't make salads much. They just buy them in little bags already. And it's usually cheaper. but they recalling them. So someone is checked and potential for people to die. So we depend on these things. And so they came. And then it went on to say that on an appointed day, Herod, wearing his royal robes, sat on his throne and delivered a public address to the people. And they shouted, "This is the voice of God and not of man." But I'm not going to go on any farther from there. We want to go back and just go over what we were looking at and see in the text that we followed what had happened. We find that as it starts off, James the apostle had died as a martyr. Herod had harassed the church. He wasn't a nice fellow. He was a king. And now the time for Herod the king stretched out his hand to harass some of the church. Herod the king, it was Herod Agrippa, the grandson of Herod the Great, who ruled the days of Jesus' birth in Matthew 2. Herod Agrippa I was also the nephew of Herod Antipas, who had the role of the trial of Jesus. So when it says Herod, it's not always the same one. There's three different Herods here. Stretched out his hand to harass the church, some from the church. No doubt this was done because it was politically popular for Herod. It pleased many of the citizens who didn't like the Christians. Talk about the day that we're living in. There is a hand reaching out to harass the church. And unfortunately, fortunately we have a chance to pray and believe for miracles. Unfortunately, some people are coming out fighting and name calling and throwing mud. And like the lady said one time, "I gave them a piece of my mind." The fellow said, "You shouldn't. You can't afford to lose any of it. You need to hold on to every bit of your mind to God. Don't go giving them a piece of your mind." But we get upset, we get angry. And the Lord said, pray for those who are in leadership over us. Don't fight them. Don't give them a piece of your mind. But many political figures are ready to persecute Christians if it will make them their politically popular. And so we see this in some of the laws that are coming in, and the whole thing for the schools. I mean, you know how much money it's going to cost us to create new washrooms in every school for some little kids that can't figure out, they're gender, whatever, confused. But we're going to have to do it because it's politically popular. Not because it's a necessity everywhere, but every school board has to come up with a policy of what you'll do. I mean, they didn't come up with policies on having kids, a youth Bible study in the school. They were told, get out of the school, you can't bring the Bible into the school. But all these other minorities, they can have what they want. It won't be long that there will be many other things coming in because of political being popular. And so we find there was the death to James. They killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. Then he killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. And this was a new development in the history of the church, of the 12 who followed Jesus. James was the first to be martyred of the 12. In Acts chapter 12, the church had been on a streak of success, experiencing one exciting conversion after another. Think of the day of Pentecost. 3,000 people came to God, and thousands of people were coming. First, there was Saul of Tarsus. Then the Gentile centurion Cornelius. Then the highly successful work among the Gentiles and the Jews that we finished off last week in our study in Antioch. But in Acts 12, the ugly opposition inspired by Satan raised its head again. Believe me, it's inspired by Satan. It's not just human reason. It's like the person said, my mind is like cement, thoroughly mixed and solidly set. Don't confuse me with the facts. When people get into these issues, there's no dealing with facts. It's emotion, it's will, intellect, will, and emotion. James was certainly not the first Christian to die in faithfulness to Jesus. As Stephen was killed, we did that in our study of Stephen in Acts chapter 7. He was martyred before this, and certain others were also. But the death of James shattered the illusion that some of the 12 enjoyed unique divine protection. Now they are the 12 apostles. And they weren't divinely protected. James, the brother of John, James in particular, might have thought that he would have protection. He was one of the special intimate of Jesus, often mentioned with his brother John and with Peter. But Jesus promised no special protection to even the closest followers. He wanted them to be ready for persecution. And that's a message that needs to go out to the church today. In countries around the world, everybody understands it. But we don't understand it in Canada. We think everything is good for us. Remember in John 10:35-40, John and his brother James came to Jesus and asked to be considered as his two chief lieutenants. Jesus replied to them, you cannot know what you ask. You can drink the cup that I drink. Can you drink the cup that I drink and be baptized with the baptism I'm baptized with? James and John, not really knowing what they're saying, replied by saying they could. Jesus promised them, you will indeed drink the cup that I drink, and with the baptism I'm baptized, you will be baptized. This martyrdom was a fulfillment of the promise for James. John fulfilled it by a lifetime of devoted service to God, despite repeated attempts to martyr him. But James did drink of the cup, and he was martyred. With the sword normally means that James would be beheaded. Wow, isn't that something they're doing today? That's what's happening today. In history of what happens when death is in the air, a fellow in the historian wrote, Eusebius, relates the story of Clement of Alexandria, who said to soldiers, and this is history, not from the Bible, but from history, church history, the soldier guarding James before the judge was so affected by his witness that he declared himself a Christian also and was willingly executed for Jesus alongside James. This is the soldier that was guarding James. He was so touched by his testimony that he was willing to die as well. And so God spoke through this. The release of Peter from prison, we see Herod has imprisoned Peter. And because he saw that it pleased the Jews, he proceeded to further to seize Peter also, it says. And now it was during the days of the unleavened bread. And so he had arrested him and put him in prison and delivered him into 4 squads of soldiers to keep him, intending to bring him before the people after Passover. Because he saw that it pleased the Jews, seeing his increased popularity when he killed James, Herod thought he could improve his ratings, his political ratings, even more when he proceeded further to seize Peter as well. There was a significant difference between the persecution of Saul of Tarsus and from Herod. Saul, wrong as he was, persecuted out of sincere, though misguided religious convictions. Herod persecuted purely out of political motives. He intended to bring him before the people after Passover. Herod decided to deal with Peter at the politically opportune time. Fearing an unpredictable mob reacting when the Passover pilgrims would fill Jerusalem. So Horton writes, the scholar writes, he gives 3 suggestions for the delay of executing Peter. So Peter's in there for a while. The people have been praying for a while. And when you pray for a while, you think you might give up, you might become discouraged and think, this is never going to work. You've been praying for a while. He's been in there for a while because the feast of unleavened bread, and it's waiting for after the Passover. And so now we're at the point where he's going to bring him up, because it says, Horton wrote this, there's 3 reasons for the delay. Number 1, Herod wanted to show how scrupulously he observed the Passover. He was the king, but he was trying to make it in the Jewish traditions, like, look, I'm honoring your Passover. Number 2, he wanted to wait until the pilgrim crowds went home, fearing a riot. And number 3, he wanted to wait until he had full attention of the Jewish population. So what did he do? He delivered him to 4 squads of soldiers. Knowing Peter, with the other apostles, had mysteriously escaped from prison before, and so Herod assigned a high security detail to guard Peter. Normally it was considered enough for a prisoner to have 1 handcuff to a soldier. But this, as a special precaution, Peter had a soldier at each side of him. Both his wrists were tied up in bonds, chains. Do we get uptight when the possibilities increase? I don't know about you, I do. When you look at it and it gets looking worse and worse and worse, well now, we're not going to let him out this time. Maybe somebody slipped up the last time, but Herod's going, no, we're going to make it foolproof, a foolproof jail. When things look really bad, where do we go? Like, I don't know, this is getting worse looking. There was always 4 soldiers guarding Peter. Extraordinary precautions were also taken by chaining the 2 soldiers instead of 1, as usual. And the other 2 soldiers kept watch outside the cell. Talk about being surrounded, talk about being impossible. And what's the church doing? They're praying. They're praying for Peter. Death is in the air. Does anybody care? They did. They were praying. They were praying. Peter was therefore kept in prison, but constant prayer was being offered to God for him by the church. Prayer was offered to God for him. In this contest, Herod and his soldiers in his prisons, but the church had the power of prayer. The outcome would soon be seen and easily decided. We're walking in a day like this. We need to know the power of prayer like never before. We're coming up to the very last days when prayer is going to be the key. Prayer is going to be the key. So why is God calling us to prayer in this bullet train that's coming down the track? I said it last Sunday, and if you didn't get it, it's on YouTube. There's a bullet train coming toward us, the economic bullet train, job loss. I was just watching in the news, and they were just talking about it, and there's just so much stuff. They were saying how many of the youth, it's I forget how many percent don't have jobs, and how many have lost jobs, and how many in Alberta, how many of the, it's 7%, and they went through a number of things about jobs, and then they went on to say that, but in government employees, they've increased it 12.5%. They're just bringing in all kinds of government employees with all the benefits and everything. They're not McDonald's wages. They've got benefits, and they're just stacking the government employees in there. And we're going like, we're in a time when a bullet train's going down the track. When we got people who can't find work. People, I just talked to one of the fellows, he's working in the butcher shop here because there's nothing out on the oil patch. He's over helping in the grocery store in the butcher shop. It's a time when, I'm telling you, prayer, don't go fight the government and boycott and go after them. We need to be praying that God gives them wisdom, because when you face chaos, when we face impossibilities, we look every direction. We try and figure out what can we do, and we are going to see development because our federal government is going to give all kinds of money for infrastructure to help create jobs. But guess what? Years from now, someone's going to pay for it. It's all on borrowed money. It's all on borrowed money. The Bible says that the borrower is servant to the lender. Who's lending money? Are we going to be like the United States, where the greatest creditors are the Chinese? And when we can't pay, do they come and take our property? I mean, there's over 1 billion of them. I mean, they love a country like, so we're seeing this. That's the bullet train. We can't solve it in our own strength, but we need to be praying. Realize. How about the Alberta's wealth has been put in a box? They won't let us go through BC with our oil. They won't let us go through Quebec with our oil. So what are we going to do with it? And we can't go south with our oil. Maybe the Russians, they don't want it because we would have to ship it over the North Pole. And that's not going to happen. So here we have wealth and we can't do anything with it. And I listened to one speaker was saying, like, they're pretty upset in Quebec and say, we can't give it, we can't go through here. It's not going to help us. But for years they benefited in the what they call the equalization of transfer payments. They benefited from Alberta's oil for years and years and years. And now they're saying, but we're not going to let it go through. And so what does that do? The refineries are over on the East Coast because of the ships that come in from Saudi Arabia and all that. And we have the oil here. So we got we got a bullet train coming down the track. We need to be praying like never before. It's not the day you want to be in government, because it doesn't matter what you're going to do. You're meeting opposition. But we as Christians don't need to be slamming and saying, calling names and accusing, saying, Lord, let's just pray for those mayors in Quebec, that they would realize that, wow, this can help everybody. It's reversing the flow of the oil, and so it can go down and come back. But let's just pray, because here we are sitting on wealth and losing our jobs. And it will continue to get worse. We're at a point where we need to trust God. The train is coming. Peter was therefore kept in prison, but the church was free to pray. When every other gate is shut and locked, the gate of heaven is open wide. We take advantage of that open gate through prayer. That's the gate that's ours. We might not be able to open the other gates. Constant prayer was offered to God for him. The word constant means the idea of earnest. Literally, the word pictures sometimes stretching out all that they can for something. The word verb ekatonos is related to ekatinis, a medical term describing the stretching of a muscle to its limits, as MacArthur says. Luke uses the same word ekatonos for the agonizing prayer of Jesus in the garden. Much of our prayers are powerless because it lacks earnestness. Too often we almost pray with the attitude of wanting God to care about the things we really don't care about too much about ourselves. Earnest prayer has the power, not because of itself, but to persuade a reluctant God. Instead, it demonstrates that our hearts are passionate about the things that God cares about. about fulfilling Jesus' promise. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, you will ask what you desire and it shall be done for you. Constant prayer was being offered up to God. It also is important to see that the church prayed to God. It's God that's the one that's the source. It may seem obvious, but often our prayers are weak because there's no consciousness of coming to the presence of a great and holy God, offering our request to Him. In the presence of Jehovah. Well, it's the song we sang this morning. In His presence. God sent the angel to free Peter from prison. Wow, that was pretty exciting. That night he was sleeping. We know that Peter showed no signs of anxiety. He wasn't, it didn't say at midnight he was sitting there worried and saying, oh Lord, do you know where I am? What am I going to do? How can I handle this? He was sleeping. Sleeping so much that the angel had to whack him to wake him up. When we're in the middle of crisis, people lose their sleep. We're uptight. We say, okay, Lord, we need to come back and say, oh God, I'm going to look to you. Wake up in the middle of the night and pray. Bless people. I always tell people, if you have trouble sleeping, I've done this for years. If I wake up in the middle of the night and I have trouble sleeping, you start thinking about something, worrying about something, focusing on something. I just start praying for the kids on my bus. And I never get to the end of the list before I'm asleep. So then I started feeling guilty. Those poor kids at the other end of the list never get prayed for. So sometimes I have to reverse it and start at the back end of the list and pray toward the front. When we turn to God in those times, Peter was sleeping. We need to relax and say, bound by 2 chains between 2 soldiers, guards at the door. The chains, the guards, the prison doors meant nothing to God and His appointed messengers. Peter was instantly set free. Do not know what was done by the angel. He didn't know what was done was real. He thought it was a dream. He thought he was seeing a vision. But they came to the gate of the city, that leads to the city, which was open to them of its own accord. The soldiers, the chains, the guard posts, the iron gate were all nothing to God with Peter because prayer was behind him. Many of us worry about iron gates. But it's impossible. But there's no jobs out there. But God. They're the iron gates. But it said when people are praying, we're looking to God, the gates open themselves. The gates open themselves. Believe me, when you get 2,000 resumes for a job, one job, it's got to be God that gives it to you. You're stuck in the middle of that pile somewhere. God can have somebody knock the pile off the table, and the guy reaches down, picks it up, and looks and goes, oh, look at Marvin Hood. I've been looking, well, look, that's just who I've been looking for. You see, but God. Or do you think that people are going to pour over 2,000 or 3,000 resumes and read them all? We're in a situation. Or someone just stops by and said, hey, you ever heard of this? Yes, he's a good guy. A reference comes, just like that. But God. But we get thrown by the iron gates. But God will take care of it when we come to it. For Peter, it opened of its own accord. That phrase used in the ancient Greek word automate. One could say the gates were opened automatically for Peter. And when we're praying, God will open them when the time is right. F.F. Bruce released a story of Sundar Singh, a Tibetan Christian who was likewise freed miraculously from prison. For preaching the gospel, he was thrown into a well and covered over it, and it was securely locked. That's how they would kill him. He would be left in the well until he died. And you could see the bones of rotting corpses of those who had already been perished in there. On the 3rd night of his imprisonment, he heard someone unlock the cover of the well. Removing it, a voice told him to take hold of the rope that was being lowered. Sundar was grateful that the rope had a loop in it because he put his foot in it because he had injured his arm on the fall down into the well. Can you imagine being thrown into a well and being left there to die with the lid locked? He injured his foot, but the person put a rope down with a loop in it. He put his foot in it. He was raised up, the cover was replaced and locked, but when he looked to thank his rescuer, he could find no one. When morning came, he went back to the same place. He was arrested and started preaching again. News of the preaching came to the official who had arrested him, and Sundar was brought before him again. When the official said, someone must have gotten you the key and released him, they searched for the key and found it on the official's own belt. God still is writing the book of Acts. He's still writing the book of Acts. He delivered me out of the hand of Herod. James was martyred, but Peter was rescued. The reasons why he does such are often unknown to us. We will know what James, having graduated to glory, but did not consider himself a loser in any way. Simply, it wasn't time for Peter to go, and for his heavenly home, to his heavenly home yet. And for us, it's the same thing. It's when it's not time. When the time is right, he'll call us. But just know, God will make a way. Don't give up. You're on the brink of a miracle. He came to the house, and this is the funny part. He came to the house, knocked on the door. Peter naturally went where he knew the Christians would be gathered praying. They were praying for days. And the girl was so glad she got to open the door. You ever get right to the last point and it just goes, they didn't sign the check. What am I going to do? Well, God's going to work it out. He's letting us know. So they were just saying, hey, it's Peter's here. They said, no way. What are you, mad? You're losing it. He can't be here. He's in jail. You know how they got him bound up in there? You know how impossible it is? Death is in the air. Herod was about to kill Peter. After the Passover, he was going to bring him out, and Peter would be a goner. He would be dead. And Herod would go like, wow, look what I did for you. You don't like him? I got him for you. But because of her gladness, she didn't open the door. They said, you're beside yourself. It's his angel. It can't be him. And then they came to the door and opened and said, wow, it's Peter. They were astonished. Oh, I don't know. And they were all talking because they said, he told them, all be quiet. Now they didn't think it was him, and now they're going, well, I knew it was going to happen. You ever been there? Oh, I just knew that was going to happen. Everybody's going to take the credit now. Well, you guys are doubting. I just knew that was going to happen. You think, and he's going, hey, okay, guys, okay, quiet. And then he said, this is what God did. And he said, tell the others, James, the other James. It wasn't James that had been martyred. And then he said, this is what's happening. And he left. And then what happened? There was no small stir in the town. Herod was sunk. He pulled all these stops out to make sure that this was impossible for him to get away. He'd done everything he could do, and he got away. So he investigated, he researched, he searched, and then he butchered the soldiers. He killed them all. He examined the guards and commanded that they should be put to death. Not always does this happen, because the Philippian jailer, when he got up, he was going to kill himself because he knew it was coming. And they said, don't kill yourself. We're all here. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Death is in the air. Does anyone care? Death is in the air. Do I care? That's the message today. Do we care? Do we care? If we care, it means prayer. It means prayer like we've never seen before. We are at the end of all times that people have lived toward. They've looked toward it. They've discovered a new planet coming. Wouldn't it be something if it's heaven? They can't see it yet, but they know it's out there. And it's bigger than Pluto, and it's bigger than this planet coming. Well, there's a city in the sky that's 4 square. There's a city that God is preparing. And it's going to happen. We're in the end times. And I just want to challenge you to pray like you've never prayed before. I do more printing on prayer than anything else. Look at the bulletin. It's all about prayer. Go through that bulletin. Just go over it every day and say, look, you can tick them off if you want. If I would be a lot more work if I put little boxes on every one, they can tick them off. But I know that your heart is there. And when you see people, just pray. And on Tuesday night, Joanne challenged us. She said, when you go into the stores, why don't you just single people out? And you could say, well, that lady with that nice red vest, and you just see Mary, and you might not know her, and say, Lord, just bless that lady with the red vest. Just bless that, and just go through and bless people. And they won't know it, doesn't matter, but you're doing something positive. You're blessing people. You never know what they're going through. And so when she shared that, I said, I got an even better idea, an enhanced idea to your idea. Why don't we go into the longest line at the checkout? And rather than getting ticked off because someone's got 15 articles in a 14-article line, why not stand there and pray for everybody in the line? I've been doing it. It's fun. It's fun. And you know what will happen if you keep praying for people in these long lines? They'll be the fastest lines in the store. Because the enemy does not want you praying and blessing people. He wants us frustrated, not fellowshipping in prayer, not lifting people up in prayer. So I want to challenge you. Death is in the air. Does anyone care? I believe you're here because you care. I believe people that are listening care. And we need to say, okay, Lord, we're going to pray. We're going to pray like we've never prayed before. And believe God that you're going to work miracles. We're in the day, a year of miracles. There's a little poster, a sign at the back there about the season. Take a look at it. We bought it yesterday. And it's a sign for love, for the different things, but it's a sign, it's a season of miracles. That means it's going to be a season of impossibles and miracles that happen. Father, thank you today for prayer. For what happened to Peter, Lord. He was just minding his own business, trapped in there, heading to death. But Lord, he wasn't crying out and weeping and wailing and saying, it's not fair, Lord, it's not fair, but he was sleeping. And you woke him up and you made the way out for him. So Father, we thank you for this. Now we thank you for your blessings that are upon us. Bless us as we go from here today, our time of fellowship together. Bless all those who couldn't come today. Bless those who can watch us on YouTube, Lord. And may it touch our hearts when we realize, God, we're living in the book of Acts. We're living in the book of Acts. It's happening day by day. So now may your grace, your peace, your blessing. And Lord, may you fill us so full that we overflow, that we spill over, and we touch others. And when we run across people, rather than getting upset with them, may we bless them and pray and minister to them, Lord, pray. In Jesus' name. And everyone said? Amen. Amen. All right, it's coffee time. Hey, we just prayed. You're here. We're going to have lunch. All right, my helper, you're back. Oh, you're back, right. Yeah, no, it's okay, we're finished. We're all coming.
Guess what? There's a cookie downstairs waiting for you.
There's a cookie downstairs?
Oh,
Oh, cookie downstairs. Cookie time. All right. And there's some goodies waiting for you in the gym. So thank you.